Okay, so in this video, I want to focus on listeners used to capture mouse and key events directly. Let's start with the mouse listener. So for any of these listener interfaces, we're going to need some sort of a program that extends a JFrame. And this is not the only way to do it, but for this course, this is the way that we're going to do it. It's a way that works really well. So when you extend JFrame, you import JFrame, you go ahead and allow it to add a default serial version ID. And then we're going to add the main method. You can do that. You just type in main, hold down control, hit space bar, and then enter, and you get your main method. And then we're going to add some of the standard stuff to the main method. Okay, so now once we have this class, we have two options. We can either let this class implement the mouse listener interface, or we could write a separate class that implements the mouse listener interface. Now, I have done it both ways in various projects, and in fact I think the only project where I did it as a separate class was in the Yahtzee project. And in all other projects I always had the JFrame implement the the listener interfaces. But just for demo, I'm going to do it as a separate class. Okay, so as soon as you have this other class and you type implements mouse listener, it gets underlined in red and you have to import mouse listener. Once you've imported mouse listener, Java knows that you're using that mouse listener interface that's defined in Java AWT event. You still then have to add the unimplemented methods. If you just hover your cursor over this now underlined red part for my mouse listener, you can click on add unimplemented methods and Eclipse will generate stubs for all the methods that need to be implemented. So for the mouse listener interface, you can capture mouse clicks, mouse presses, mouse releases, mouse entered, and mouse exited. So I've added just a little bit of code to mouse clicked. So this method receives a mouse event. That mouse event, if you type in e dot, it gives you a whole bunch of methods that you can use with that mouse event. Typically, what you want to know is where did they click? And get X and get Y will do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the X and Y value and then print something out to the console that say, hey, the mouse was clicked at, and then the X and Y values of where they were clicked. But before this does anything, right now if I just run my application, I can click all I want, nothing happens. Why not? Because I haven't registered the mouse listener. So in a JFrame, so my mouse listener demo, I just opened a window. I didn't actually do anything in the constructor. I need to write a constructor that is going to go ahead and create an instance of my mouse listener and register it as the listener for this JFrame. Okay, so I've created the constructor. It just says public mouse listener demo, the name of the class, and then the round brackets, squiggly brackets, and then the code that is going to be executed when you create a new instance of the mouse listener. So I'm going to say new my mouse listener. So I've created an instance of my mouse listener class, and I use the add mouse listener method that my mouse listener demo inherited from JFrame to add that new instance of my mouse listener to the JFrame. So when I run this, it should get something on the console whenever I click. And sure enough, if I move my mouse around and click, I get out in the console mouse clicked at. And so by adding a mouse listener, I have to create an instance of something that implements the mouse listener interface, and then I add it as a mouse listener to my JFrame. Then, for thereafter, whenever the mouse is clicked, the mouse clicked event, or mouse clicked method, will be called whenever that mouse clicked event occurs. And whenever a mouse is pressed, the mouse pressed method gets called. Whenever the mouse is released, the mouse released method gets called. When the mouse enters the window, the mouse entered method gets called. And whenever the mouse exits the window, the mouse exited method gets called. So now let's see how the mouse motion listener works. And just for fun, instead of creating this as a separate class, I'm just going to implement it right in the same class as the JFrame. So I'm going to say implements mouse motion listener. And again, I have to import the mouse motion listener, and then I have to add the unimplemented methods. And so then Eclipse creates stubs for mouse dragged and mouse moved. And so I'll just add code that prints out at the console the mouse is dragged and the coordinates. And this time, instead of creating an instance of a separate class, I'm in the constructor. I have an instance of the class already, so I can say add mouse motion listener this. So if you implement it in a separate class, you have to create an instance of that class and add that newly created instance as the listener. But if you implement in the same class, then that one instance of the class that you're creating is already created, so you just add this. Essentially, the mouse listener demo is registering itself as the mouse motion listener. So when I run this, if I drag around, I get the dragged. If I click, I get mouse clicked. Now, one thing that's important to note, that mouse clicked, if I click and drag and release, it's not counted as a click. It's only counted as a click if I press and release without moving the mouse at all. So let's look at the key listener interface. I'm going to create a separate class that implements the key listener interface. I'm going to go ahead and import key listener, and then I'm going to add the unimplemented methods. The key listener interface has 3 methods that it requires: key typed, key pressed, and key released. So when I add the unimplemented methods, Eclipse automatically generates stubs for these. Now, key typed is a little bit funny. This was created for things like word processors. So when you're in a word processor and you press a key and hold it down, there's a key repeat. The key is typed the moment you press it, and as you hold it, after a little while, it starts to repeat really quickly. This key typed method behaves that way. Key pressed will not repeat no matter how long you hold it down. It gets called the moment you press the key down, and key released gets called the moment you release the key. Now, I usually implement video games, not word processors. So the key pressed event and key released event are much better to use if you're trying to control some sort of animated thing on your screen. If you're trying to type text into some sort of a window or something, key typed works better. So with the key events, one thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to figure out which key has been pressed. And so this key event holds information about which key was pressed, what caused that event to occur. So you can say if e dot get key code is equal to double equals E dot. And then down here there are a bunch of constants, VK underscore. And there should be one for the left arrow. Let's check that. VK underscore, whoops, E dot, VK underscore L, and I see a VK underscore left. That would be for the left arrow. VK stands for virtual keyboard, so if you just type in E dot VK underscore, you should see the list, and L for left for the left arrow should be right for the right arrow, U for up, and D for down. So here I can just print out. If I type in sysout, hold down Control and hit space, it gives me system.out.println. And then I'm going to say left arrow was clicked or pressed. Silly me, I made a common mistake. I've created the class, but I've forgotten the last step. I haven't registered as the key my key listener as the key listener for my demo. Okay, so now I've added the key listener as the key listener for my demo. If I run it, hopefully, yay! When I press, the moment that I press down on the key, oh, it repeats and it begins to keep repeating. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so out of curiosity, I commented out the stuff in key pressed and put it under key typed. I still use key pressed and key released for video game stuff. I've done it, it works. And in next week's assignment, I'll show you how I do that exactly. But I just want to see how this key typed works, if it works the way I thought it did. So I've just put the code for key pressed, so it should print something when a key is typed. And it doesn't seem to be typing anything. Okay, so I just printed out hello instead of putting this if statement for VK underscore left, and if I type, I get my hello, but when I hit the left arrow key, I don't get anything. So there is something different about key typed. It's not picking up the arrow keys, or if it is, well, it's not picking them up at all, because if it was, I would get a hello the moment I hit the left arrow, and I don't get anything. So apparently key typed doesn't pick up the arrow keys. Whether or not it repeats, what causes it to repeat. Well, I can't. Okay, so it's looking a lot like mouse clicked. There is one other thing that you need to be aware of. If you try this out on your computer, a common thing, these listeners work when the J frame has focus. So one of the things that I've been doing, and it's become habit for me, is that I click in the window and then I start typing. If I click out of the window and give some other application focus, then that first click, well, in this case it's got it, but you got to be really careful. If it doesn't pick up the first one, click in the window again, key press, give this. Now my key presses are captured by the Eclipse window. I have to click in this window from my key presses to have effect in that window. It has to have focus to get the keyboard events. It won't get mouse dragged either unless it has focus. So in this video, we've seen the mouse listener, the mouse motion listener, the key listener. We've seen implementing them in separate, the interface in a separate class, and then adding it to the JFrame. We've seen implementing it in the same class. But the steps that you need to do. So first step is to create a class that extends JFrame. Second one is to create a class that implements the listener interface. The third step is to add an instance of the thing that implements the interface to the JFrame using the add, if it's a mouse listener, the add mouse listener method. If it's a mouse motion listener, the add mouse motion listener method. If it's a key listener, then it's the add key listener method. So create the JFrame, create the class that implements the listener interface and implement its methods, and then add an instance of that listener class to the JFrame using the appropriate methods. In the next video, we'll look at some interfaces that use pre-built widgets. Have fun.